Welcome to Advisors on Growth. I'm your host, Derek Colin. Today's episode, we have a very special guest from Griffin Resources. She is the advisor, and her name is Ashleigh Kirsten. How you doing today?
Wonderful, wonderful. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for joining us. So, can you walk us through, how your role fits into the bigger picture at Griffin Resources?
Yes. So originally, my company was acquired, which was a growth management firm, was acquired by Griffin Resources. So luckily, I get to be an advisor on the board there and really help assist with gross revenue coming in and advising on growth strategies and more like long term vision, wherever I can fit into that need and how the company can project going forward, just supporting the CEO more than anything else.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Yeah.
Fun role.
And
I got the better piece of of the deal, I think.
very nice. So when do you typically like get pulled in? When do they usually pull you in for, certain concerns or strategy?
Yeah, so for clients when it comes to growth strategies, so like readying businesses for sale, right? Like they're wanting to at some point exit, their company, or maybe they need capital, in order to get to the next level. I may be pulled in that way, or they're wanting to acquire companies, right? They want to grow by acquisition. And so I may be pulled in from that lens, which does hold somewhat of a mergers and acquisition lens, but more from like a strategic growth side. Like, how does it work for that client in order to continue to grow, right? Most people don't talk
Yeah.
about what it's going to look like to exit one day. And those
Yeah.
conversations should be happening sooner than later.
Awesome. So my question was just to be clear, as an advisor with Griffin Resources, when it comes to M&A, you're helping other companies. Can you kind of elaborate?
Yeah, so
Wh-
sometimes just through the lens of our already established staff, that may have a question about that, right? And so it's kind of I become an extension through that staff or directly with clients that may be curious as to, what it could look like one day to sell or growth strategies that are in place that can make them more sellable, right? Like
Mhm.
what is needed to look more sellable. So, kind of giving them some of that information either through our own staff and maybe what resources they could utilize and leverage from either a consulting basis or a fractional basis in order to accomplish those goals during whatever their timeline looks like. And that's more from like when they go to sell, right? And then also from a buy side is maybe they're wanting to acquire businesses. What kind of businesses are out there, right? That can help them either vertically integrate or horizontally integrate. Is that even possible, right, for them?
Mhm.
And so we'll kind of talk through some of those brief questions that they may have, even down to some basic terminology like due diligence or an LOI. What is an LOI? Like some of this language is very unfamiliar for most of these business owners. So being able to provide that helps them just feel more comfortable with what the end may be because there's always going to be an end. No
Yeah.
business owner comes out alive. It sounds kind of dreary, but it's really not. The business can continue on forever, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Beyond your lifespan, and that's always the goal, at least for me. If I have kids one day or and grandchildren and stuff like that, once I'm gone, I want something that's self-sustaining that can continue on for at least 100 years or more.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I always use the phrase like you want to be able to run your business like it could run forever, but that you could exit it tomorrow if you had to, right?
Yeah.
So being able to provide some of those tools and solutions, obviously at Griffin Resources, we provide a lot of tools and resources that can help to supplement or to adjunct with inside that company can help them get to a successful exit one day or be a part of that same thread that will get there one day.
Yeah, a better evaluation because they have all the resources in place that if that continues to run. And some say if you can leave the business and go on vacation for a week or a month and the business is self-sustaining, then you got a good business model and someone wants to buy it, right?
That's right. That's right.
So could you share like a bit about like more details about your background and how you came to be an advisor and how you were able to help other companies with Griffin Resources?
So, like in my past company, you mean? Like,
Yeah.
how did I do it in my
Yeah.
past?
Like what skill sets or unique value proposition do you offer coming from the Griffin Resources side to someone on the sales side?
Oh, yeah. So, well, I've been in their shoes, right? So I always tell everybody, look, when I'm looking at my colleague across from me, which is another seller, I've been in their shoes. I've been a business owner, a CEO, and luckily I'm an advisor on the board of that piece of the pie, right? Like I get to be
Yeah.
there. So coming with a compassionate lens is super important because you got to be able to connect with them and then hopefully lead through it, meaning they're going to have questions and you got to be able to be responsive and answer to them. So, first and foremost is the compassionate side, been there and done it. So, I kind of bring that, to the forefront, either with, team members or for the CEO or any questions that may arise. I've kind of walked that road. I'm a growth junkie by nature, so I just love to grow companies, right? And then, so anybody who wants to talk about what that looks like, how you grow to not go broke, right? Because you can be a growth junkie, but you got to watch for profits. You got to be profitable. So being able to analyze P&Ls and balance sheets very quickly and ascertain where things could be some landmines or some red flags can really be helpful for those clients, right? They might be a client that's taking on some of our recruiting services that we have. But what they may not realize is that they're churning on the back end, right? That they're not retaining. So being able to have that experience, and obviously, our staff has all of that experience and everything, and
Yeah.
being able to like check that very quickly and answer those questions is extremely helpful for those clients ultimately and for our own growth internally.
Yeah. So, what is a problem that clients often think is one thing, but from your seat, it's actually something else?
Oh, that's a great one. So a lot of times it's, I just need sales. I just
Mm.
need sales, right? And yes, revenue cures all. Okay. But what I find a lot of times is when clients are kind of small, right? But they've grown to a size that they actually need a sales leader, okay, in that company. But they can't exactly afford, like, let's say, a vice president of sales to manage a sales team. Okay. So they may have one or two sales reps, but those one or two sales reps are really reporting to nobody and they're out in the field. They're knocking on doors, so to speak, right? They're going B2B, B2B all over the place, but they have no guidance and no support. So, how successful do you think those sales reps are?
Mm.
Not successful.
Yeah.
They're not going to
Yeah.
be because they're lacking that support and that guidance on how many calls do they need to make a day? How many referral sources should they be seeing? What are the questions that they need to ask? Are they good at opening? Are they good at closing? What do they need help on? Routing, territory management. There's all these other details and they're out in the field. So they're lost. And then what happens is they become unsuccessful and then they're either fired out of that company or they quit, right? So they're turning over these sales reps and they just want like a really bang out sales rep. And so what their issue is that it doesn't matter which sales rep they bring in there. They're going to need coaching and guidance. And so to be able to get them to look at you're too big now to not have it, but you're too small to afford it, and knowing that they need some sort of fractional sales leader there to help guide and be
Hmm.
able to have them spend that small amount of money, really nominal amount of money, will help them to get that salesperson to grow and bring them in the revenue, which is what they're asking for. So I would say that's probably been one of the things that I've seen the most over several years of where people really have a challenge at. The other issue I see is a lot of with CEOs, right? Or founders, especially founder CEOs more than anything else, is that they have a hard time delegating. I have a hard time with knowing when wearing multiple hats is now being a disservice to the company, right? Because they've grown to the point that you can't do all of those things and that they do
Yeah.
have to start delegating and trusting the people to execute what the vision is. So they have a little bit of a challenge of being a founder, now really a CEO that's a visionary. So being able to executively coach them through that, which that has a lot of own challenges through there because they don't necessarily know that they're in their own way. And it's a very delicate conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like it could be expensive operationally if they're wasting time on certain things when they can improve productivity on another. So before like something like that becomes a problem or gets expensive, what are the warning signs usually that show up that leaders tend to overlook?
Yeah, so they're not doing a balanced scorecard or they're not staying to their calendar, right? So they should have a mix of futuristic things on their calendar. I think one of the big things is just open it up. Open up Outlook and look at what's going on in there. And if they're not sticking to that, right? And they don't have time for deep thought work usually in the morning, okay? Cuz
Mhm.
that's want to have that deep thought work, one-on-ones with their team that's going to
Mhm.
help to give them the vision, so to speak, and let them implement those pieces. And also futuristic, right? If they're not doing what is needed in the future, then those are big warning signs that they're just basically being reactive, which is not going to lead the company to the next level. From another systematic issue is you'll start to see things within the P&Ls and the balance sheets, taking out
Mhm.
debt that may be not necessary, kind of turnover of staff because it'll start to impede into the culture of the organization. And those could be some late signs too, to be frank,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
those will all be a part of it. So, and not necessarily meeting certain budgets. And then the most palpable is just mere frustration. Like you don't feel like you're winning. You feel like you're on a hamster wheel, right?
Yeah.
You're working a lot, but you're not really seeing anything transpire. Your frustrations are bubbling up higher than they were previously. And those are subjective, but you can usually glean that from them and just their exhaustion if it's there.
Mm. In regards to like P&L, like when leaders miss that issue for too long or whatever the issue may be, is it somewhat top down? Is it leadership or the hiring managers not communicating well with their employees? Where does that cost usually show up first?
It depends on, where the issue could be and how big the company is, right? Because smaller
Yeah.
companies are not gonna have a lot they're not gonna have complicated P&Ls, right? But and it depends on the type of company that it is. If it's like heavy manufacturing or if there's a lot of assets in there and then they're buying up a lot of assets or there's a ton of inventory that's not actually leaving. So it's
Mhm.
just sitting on shelves to show up, through those regards, but more service based, you're just noticing maybe there's tons in the payroll, right? Because service based is
Mhm.
gonna have a lot of payroll that is kind of getting expended out of there. So from a basic standpoint is are your profits shrinking too? And some of it there's times where you want to reinvest the money back into the company for R&D or for different technology pieces that are going on, but if those pieces are not going on and your sales are somewhat going down from a gross revenue standpoint, that you're going to start to see could see that quarter after quarter. And also your forecasts. If you're not meeting your budgets and your forecasts, there's a problem. We've got to dive in and see what it is. That's actually is it, do a SWOT analysis
Yeah.
and see
That's why, yeah.
yeah, what's actually happening that you can't achieve them, or maybe your goals were too high, right? And you got to tweak that back.
Yeah. I haven't heard SWOT analysis in a while. Well, yeah.
I
But yeah,
said, but a goodie, right?
yeah. I remember my 9 to 5, they used to implement that the SWOT analysis, and we used to have our weekly meetings, or actually daily, actually. But yeah, I haven't heard that in a while. Well, go ahead.
No, I mean, SWOT analysis is phenomenal. It's like,
Mhm.
so key buzzwords, right? SWOT analysis. Are you doing those? SOPs. Do you have processes and efficiencies, right?
Mhm.
So those start to when you're chaotic and nobody's really following anything, there's really no process in place, right? That becomes an issue where you're like, okay, it's time. We've grown so far. Now we're going to start going backwards because now we need people to all be following the same thing instead of being reactive that's in there. So there'll be a lot
Right.
of buzzwords I feel like through our discussion today that can be
Yeah.
very helpful.
Yeah, definitely. So what, do like the healthiest companies do early on, like earlier or differently, so this doesn't become like a bigger problem? Is it SWOT analysis? Is it
I
uh
would say planning. You know what? So there's a few
mm,
things that I've noticed. And I'm gonna give you kind of fuzzy words at first, right? Because there's a couple things I've noticed with the most successful businesses. And what
mm,
I see in those founder-led successful businesses, right, is they have two things. They have this undeniable optimism and resilience. They have incredible resilience to get through the hard times. And that's
mm,
somewhat that gut and that grit just pushes them through, right? And then they also have a really, really good support system at home. So, kind of that work and life, like that support system or that partner, that spouse is right
mhm.
next to them the whole way through. And those two pieces are super important because you can be as technical as you want. You can have all the spreadsheets, you can have all the planning, but I've evaluated many different companies, sellability, for acquisitions or whatever it is. And I found that those two pieces are incredibly important. And if you don't get those two right, I just don't see that any of these other pieces are going to mean much. So the other pieces are that they have a healthy obsession with the greatness of what their company can be early on, right? Because that's what's going to get them through the hard days if they have that. They really believe in the company and they're chasing what that solution and that impact is going to be either on us as humans or in society in a greater impact. If they're
Yeah.
chasing just the money, I find that they lose sight, right? Because the money is not going to be enough to get them through the really hard times. And so they
Hmm.
tend to create a plan that is going to impact and be more realistic from a performance standpoint than it is the ones that are chasing the money, so to speak, right? So being able to plan appropriately, and now with AI, with Claude, I mean, you can build a business in 3 weeks. Like it's not hard, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So if you can't plan and have that all together and understand that cash is king, they're going to have to be realistic in the amount of cash that they're going to need so that they don't go under too. That's what I find to be most successful.
Yeah, so they don't go under as well. Yeah. If a leader is listening to this right now and suspects their company is going under or heading in the wrong direction, what should, they look at first? Do you know?
So, I'm gonna answer that question, but I'm also gonna give this. I think that people sometimes don't give up. They stay in too long. They dump in too much money. So you also have to know when you've got to learn to fail fast at times, that a business is not going to take off or it's just not the right timing or whatever that looks like. And I have to have a hard conversation with themselves and with their support system, with mentors and everybody else as to if their business is failing, what is the best solution for the business and for their team, right? Because they probably want their team to maintain jobs or something else. And that might not be with them. That might not be them leading it, right?
Yeah.
They're going to have to look at their cash reserves or their ability to obtain capital, right? So if that's loans, lines of credit, get a line of credit early. Get it when you don't need it. I see people so many times are like, I don't need a line of credit. No, get a line of credit, use it and pay it off. Use it and pay it off. Because
Hmm.
the only time you can get money is when you don't need money.
Yeah.
So if they haven't done that, is a bank really going to give them money when they're on fire and the ship's going under? Probably not. So that's part of that planning piece of it. So they have to look and see how much they could survive, meaning paying for their staff, their company, and the ability to gain capital. And then once they download all of that information, they need to be decisive. The best leaders in the world are not always right, but they're sure to make a decision.
Yeah. And if they were thinking, I may need Griffin Resources as, an option to help me out with X, Y, Z, what would your unique value proposition be in terms of why they should sign up with you or work with you as an advisor? If to sell side, buy side.
Yes, I mean for any various reasons when it comes to growth, right? So if they want to grow, if their company is like, we want to grow, we need to know what resources we're going to need in order to be a successful business in different stages of that business, then that's really a trigger point to just make the phone call and see what services we do provide. And then also, like from an intake standpoint, us being able to just assess what it is that their goals are, because they may want to grow, but we don't know what their goals are ultimately, right? And then we'd be able to provide them the right services at the right time, depending on what those goals are, in order to get them to their ultimate goal, whatever that looks like, whether it's their kids to take over, whether it's to have it forever, right? Or to eventually sell, just understanding where it is that they're headed. And then we can kind of plug and play from there, so to speak.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ashley, for joining us on Advisors on Growth. It's been a pleasure. For those of you who want to check out Ashleigh Kirsten, she is located on LinkedIn, so you can look her up. And the website for Griffin Resources, if you guys are interested in signing up or having an advisor such as Ashley behind you and to help your company with growth and a better valuation, you can go to griffin-resources.com. Thank you so much, Ashley.
Thank you so much for having me, Derek. Absolute pleasure.
Pleasure.